Hello, my name is John Graves, and I'm doing this blog as a follow-on to a previous one that I did on solutionsanz.blog called ICS to API Platform, and shows how you could automate publishing ICS services into the API platform. I'm kind of a long-time BA, ex-BA employee, and I'm partial to Service Bus and some of the things that you've been able to do over the years with Service Bus. And a lot of the features in the 12C release allow you to do REST type of services very easily in Service Bus as well. So I wanted to kind of do the same thing with Service Bus, although I think it makes a little bit less sense in that case because Service Bus allows you to make much more complex REST kinds of services and expose them and so forth. But initially, here's some sample code and some ideas that could be used to do the similar thing to publish Service Bus assets into the API platform using some REST services. So what I did is in JDeveloper, I created a simple project that has a single pipeline that does all the work and utilizes a set of APIs in the API platform. So I went through and I created maybe 5 or so. Let me, if I can bring this up, I can show you several of the REST services that I needed for the API platform so that we could utilize them and use them for this use case. So creating an API, updating several aspects of that API, deploying it. Also this preview so that I can look up the existing APIs to be able to see if I already have an API deployed so I don't have to do another one. So just like in the previous example of ICS inside of this pipeline, I go in and I get a list of all the Service Bus assets and specifically looking for ones that have a REST API. Now, Service Bus doesn't support REST services to get that list, so I wrote a utility class. I utilized the utility class in Java, and this inside of this service call does that Java call out, and I'll include that code. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of samples online about getting some of the ALSB or OSB configurations through Java. So it makes a Java call out, gets all of the data out of Service Bus, and then it will use that to determine which ones need to get published to the API. I also get a list of APIs by doing a call out to that REST service to see what APIs are currently inside of the API platform. And then for inside this create APIs stage, I have a for each, and this for each is all around the various proxies that are returned back from my get list of OSB proxies. So that returns an array of proxies with some definitions. So for each of those, I go in and do a simple check to see if that proxy has a particular name pointing to that name is a REST based service, and I say if it exists in the existing API list. So if it exists in the existing API list, I skip this stuff. Otherwise, I come in to do the service callouts to then create it if it doesn't exist here. So here we have a service callout. The first step here is in the API platform to create an API, which you can see here. The next step is to do an update to the API state. The next is to do an update of the API identity or the vanity name, then publish it to the developer portal, and then deploy it to the gateway. These steps right here correspond one-to-one with the steps that I had written in the API or ICS to API platform here. Create, set it to release, set the vanity name, dev portal, etc. So I just did the same exact steps in the Service Bus, calling the various REST services on the assets in the Service Bus. So it's pretty straightforward there. One thing I will note is because I had access to Service Bus as my tooling, which is a quite extensive capability, I went ahead and externalized this idea of a template so that I have this item here, which is the XML definition of the what you would normally do for JSON payloads to define what your request and response pipelines in the API platform should be for like the service request, the service response, key validation, throttling, these kinds of things. So this template can be used in the service bus to define how those services in the API platform should be exposed. So I just did the same thing in ICS. It's much more hidden. In service bus, I use this template when I build it. So after deploying this service bus process, as you saw in my SCA, I don't have anything set up to call it. I'm not sure whether I want to set it up to be called by the enterprise scheduler, or just expose it as a service. It gets called by some other external system, or maybe during a deployment phase, automatically kicking this off. So this is doesn't have any way to access it directly, so I'll just use the test harness. So if I go into the service bus console, I have the project that is the one that deploys it to the API platform, and I have this simple service bus with a REST service that I want to get showing up in my API platform. So if I look over my API platform, I can see that I've got some here, but this particular one that's called sample OSB REST services, I don't believe is there, so we should be okay. It's not there from a previous run. So my API platform does not have that service. If I then go into my pipeline and run this manually, it will go through and do the execution of looking into the service bus for assets, ideally finding that particular REST service and then publishing it. So we can see from the trace log that it went out and got a list of proxies, and it found this REST proxy, so it got the list and found all the ones that were of type proxy. And then it got a list of all the APIs that are out there, and this is a larger list of all of the existing APIs that exist in the API platform. And then for the one case that I had, this would be in a for loop, it creates the API, does the service callouts to the various pieces to do the create and deploy. So now, since this is all complete, if I go back to my API platform and I refresh, I can see there's a simple REST service here that points to, let me see, my simple REST, was that the right one? Yeah, this is the OSB project. The actual REST service is called simple REST. If I go back to the service bus console, the project name is REST services project, but the actual REST service that's exposed is called simple REST, and so that's the one that gets brought in and published into the API platform. It is set up automatically to be in the production gateway and has the key validation rate limiting set up here, and then I set up my service request to then forward on to my REST service inside of my service bus sample. It's also been set up to deploy the production gateway and to set up inside of the developer portal and be ready for that. The thing that's not quite as straightforward in this is the documentation. Since Service Bus doesn't typically have the documentation URL built into that service, I just kind of have this dummy one here. It'd be nice to have that point to maybe an apiary or some other documentation that points to what the documentation for that Service Bus service is. That's pretty easy to set up based on that template that I showed you before inside of here. You can set this up and say what the documentation URL should look like. So that's pretty much, here's the API documentation, so where that should point. So that's pretty much it for the Service Bus to automatically look inside of itself, introspect itself, and then go out and publish it to API platform. It would be quite easy to set up this to interrogate another service bus by just taking that piece of code that reads uses the Java and deploy that into a different service bus, and then just call it through some services and get it from a remote service bus. So that would be an easy extension as well. So I hope this is showing a little bit more about how to expose things into the API platform, and in this case, service bus assets. Thank you.